Hello and welcome one and all across the MediaBeat world, which spreads to 40 or 50 countries now, which is exceedingly exciting. I hope you're all enjoying and can understand and feel that you can feedback your thoughts on any subject that we've covered, or opinions that we've opined, or indeed things that you'd like to cover on the LinkedIn page, which is active and ready for you, and really we would love your input. So it's Me to Meet with Maureen and Claire. As ever, we are on episode 70. I love a round number. 70. We've got through 70 of these things. This is magnificent. And we hope today is going to be, as usual, epic. And we're very excited. We get excited quite easily, but this one's a good one because Claire has come up with a deep dive idea, slightly from left field, but it should be really interesting, and it's Wikipedia, which is a thing that's ubiquitous. It's part of our lives now. But where did it come from? From whence did it came? Why? How? Does it make any money? I suppose we might start with what is it, but I believe most people will understand what it is. But anyway, without further ado, Claire.
Wikipedia, yes, it's become such a staple of our lives that it's kind of hard to remember. In fact, none of my children remember a world before Wikipedia. They think there was never any dictionary or encyclopedia, and everything was always on Wikipedia. It was created officially on the 15th of January 2001. So it's been around for 24 years, and it was created by two people. One whose name you'll probably recognize, Jimmy Wales. And the reason you probably recognize that name is that very often when you go on Wikipedia, there's the big sign at the top, the message from Jimmy Wales. But there was actually a second guy at the beginning called Larry Sanger, with Jimmy and Larry. Fell out, and so Larry left quite early in the process. But originally it was Jimmy Wales and Larry Sanger. They launched it in 2001, in January 2001. Today, Wikipedia exists in 300 languages. It has 64 million articles, and it attracts more than 1.5 billion unique device visits, as they call it, so unique visits per month, and 13 million edits as well per month. Now, I don't know if any of you, Oliver and Maureen, have ever tried to edit a Wikipedia entry. It's
I
a whole
have.
process.
Yes.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oliver looks like you have. You have. It's a whole process, obviously, because there's a lot of processes, and that's the core of Wikipedia. It's entirely crowdsourced and maintained by a community of volunteers, which are called Wikipedians. I have learned it's a pretty original name. And that's a very interesting thing to look at, because especially in its early years, it really was quite heavily criticized. We forget now because it's become so ubiquitous, but it was criticized because it has enormous biases, which came from the fact that Wikipedians were mostly from the global north. They were mostly male. It felt that a lot of the content was potentially, there was a gender bias, there was a geographical bias. And there was a lot of backlash originally around Wikipedia, certainly in schools, where it was used in the way that ChatGPT is, and this is why the comparison is interesting. A lot of these criticisms are now levied at ChatGPT and the other AI softwares. But as we moved into the sort of late 2010s, it feels that because of the scale of it and because of the number of people, the crowd effect, as it were, started to work. And today it's become, somewhat ironically, probably the most important fact-checking site on the internet. This is where people go to when they want to figure out if something is true or not, because they know that it's much harder to edit, for instance, to edit Wikipedia to pretend that somebody's dead. If they're not dead, it's actually some of the things some of the systems that have been in place that are much better. So I thought it'd be interesting to look a little bit at that. I first looked at Jimmy Wales, and I learned, I did not know this, that he's actually British. Did you know this? I didn't know this. He's American born, but he is British, and also he's commonly known as Jimbo Wales. So we'll call him from henceforth Jimbo. And although he was born in Alabama, he is originally British. He still works at Wikipedia. He's on the Wikimedia Foundation Board of Trustees. He's created other projects, and his whole ethos is about free content and open source projects. So his work and his ethos has obviously had enormous impact. The other thing I was wondering, because Jimbo, as I now call him, because it's my bestie, constantly asks me for money when I'm on Wikipedia, I was wondering whether Wikipedia was really losing a lot of money. It turns out it's not actually. It's quite cash positive, Wikipedia, which is great news, I think, because I think it's a great resource and I don't want it to go anywhere. But in the last financial year, it received $13.4 million in donations, which remains its primary source of funding, but it also has an enormous endowment which generates investment income, and that's another additional source of funding. So it's actually fairly cash positive. It had a surplus of $7 million last year, which doesn't sound huge if you compare it to, the sort of Nvidia and the people that we talk to. But for essentially a charity, it's not a bad place to be. So it's not going under anytime soon, although it does depend on individual donations. So if you are donating, please continue to do so. There have been a number of controversies, across its time. There were legal challenges in various countries, including most recently in India, because they thought that some of the content was defamatory towards certain Indian companies. There was a lot of controversy. Whenever there's a conflict anywhere, there's a feeling that there's a bias on Wikipedia. There's Elon Musk has been a noted person who doesn't like Wikipedia. I think we should just digest that news for a moment. But most recently, and the reason actually Wikipedia caught my eye originally is because they posted something about AI, and specifically about the fact that AI LLMs scrape Wikipedia constantly. And the point of the post was to say this actually costs us money because it increases our traffic. The LLMs are scraping our data constantly, and most of they don't really have content costs because the editors are all volunteers, but they do have infrastructure costs, and those are being increased by the large language models. So that's something that they are pushing back on. But the other thing is really going back to Jimbo's sort of core tenet of open source, allowing human-driven consensus model, as it were, that the belief is that will eventually drive accuracy and reliability. I mean, that has worked for Wikipedia. I don't think it always works, but that certainly is the ethos behind the content. And from that perspective, they very much see the sort of closed loop AI systems as something that is as not necessarily the direction that the world should be going to. So there's a bit of a ethical divergence of ideas here. So yeah, those are the key things I found out about Wikipedia. I thought it was interesting. It's become such an important part of our lives. It may evolve to become something slightly different now that people are using generative AI much more in terms of search, and so we will still use Wikipedia, but in much more as a summary, as summarized by AI agents. But it will. I think I really like Wikipedia. I think it's a huge success story of open source systems and crowd wisdoms. So that's the story of Wikipedia for today. But Maureen, what did you think? What do you think of Wikipedia?
I agree. I mean, I love Wikipedia as well, and thanks for the history. We'd all forgotten, and we all thought that Wikipedia sort of existed since .0, and because I think once Britannica encyclopedias, the book copies started to sort of be removed from everybody's shelves, you wondered where you would be able to sort of quickly reference that little question, and as you rightly say, now that's probably being displaced somewhat by ChatGPT. But that said, I think this became a kind of, and it is now, a really important issue for businesses like this, which effectively, as you say, the cost is free, the content is free, sorry, not the cost, but the infrastructure costs are quite significant. And I think it came about that they started to investigate a little about why is it that our infrastructure is being pressurized and is almost sort of on the precipice of collapse. And it all was triggered by when President Jimmy Carter, when he died, and everybody wanted to go and watch the inaugural speeches, or there was like a 1 hour and a half video about Jimmy Carter's life. I went and saw that. I went and saw it on YouTube. I didn't go, and I wasn't routed through Wikipedia, but a lot of people watched it. And of course, that video content just took up so much GPU space, or the capacity, that it really did put a lot of pressure on its infrastructure. And I don't think Wikipedia is alone. There are a couple of other companies that are facing similar issues, whereby all of these LLMs are scraping all of the content, and text doesn't take up as much compute power as video. And of course, now we're moving into an era of video. All of that scraping of information and pulling through of that data is going to cause a big issue for these free, so to speak, providers. And the other two that came to mind was, and Oliver will be familiar with these, GitHub is one, which is the open source developers environment. And also, we'll all be familiar with this, but OpenStreetMap, the geospatial sort of map, where that also is free. And they're really trying to sort of put some pressure on. We don't mind providing free, but if you'd like to not just scrape our data and at least give us some form of contribution to help us, continue in existence, then so be that. So I think there's a big tug and pull and push around. Fine, if you guys with the big LLMs want to start scraping our data and our information, at least let there be either a fair license agreement or a fair degree of support or contributions. And as you rightly pointed out, Wikipedia survives on donations. It's simple contributions. There's no advertising. We don't suffer advertising. It's ad free, and I think that only fair, as well. I'm very much leaning towards. This is a great resource. We all love it. We put it in even our official reports, and we really do it because it's a trusted source of information. And for the reasons that you've pointed out, where there is rigorous diligence around, who's contributing. There's a lot of fact checking there. There's a lot of good information. I mean, I love my favorite, as we all know, Big Bang Theory. Monsieur Sheldon Cooper, the famous quote that I love to cite is, and if you may recall, if I could speak languages of rabbits, they would be amazed, and I would be their king. I read that on Wikipedia. So he said, if our godlike character, our god Sheldon Cooper, goes to
your god, Maureen, but yes,
okay. my god, the god, says that he would cite anything from Wikipedia. That is something special. There's something special. But no, I think it's fascinating story, Claire. I love the fact that you bring these beautiful stories from goodness knows where, the ends of the earth, but it is very contemporary. It is a real big issue, and I think there's going to be some controls that are being put in place, and I've actually said that they've got this scheme called responsible use of infrastructure. I think they're going to start to work on that in 2025. They'll be able to at least dedicate individuals from within their infrastructure to try and help at least sort of stop these bots from crawling over their data, and at least prevent any of these sort of infrastructural cracks from occurring, because it will affect us all. When we want to go and have a look for information, we will not be able to. It will buffer because it's bombarded by these LLMs looking at the data and just grabbing it constantly, and that's taken up a lot of infrastructure, a lot of infrastructural costs as well that they don't have. So they've got to find a balance. Yeah, but fascinating story. I love this deep dive. I love it, Claire.
Classic. I'm really glad you're both fans, actually, because there was a lot of cynicism, I guess, in the 2010s, I think you were alluding to, Claire, of, Wikipedia was just sort of a sink of people who are not that educated. But I've tried to edited twice and been successful once, which was to update the entry on Mr. Brightside by the Killers to say that it was used by the darts player Nathan Aspinall as play on music. So I thought that was a thing that the world needed to know. Yeah,
I'm glad
exactly.
you made it.
And then the one that I'm more of an expert on, which is fourth generation computing languages, which is how I started in the industry. I had a real fight with a guy where I tried to add a language that I thought was an important part of the history of 4GLs, and he was having none of it. So I was irritated because I thought I knew a little bit more than, I'm assuming, a male. But it showed that there is quality control, the controls you were talking about there, Maureen, so you can trust it maybe more than you think. And I quite like the polite way they ask for money as well. It's not too pushy. Or guilt-ridden, like The Guardian always make you feel guilty. The Guardian always say, oh, give us £2 or else the world will fall apart because there'll be no other voice that isn't owned by a billionaire. Anyhow, that was great. Classic. As I thought, and yeah, what a great idea. Wikipedia has become part of our lives. How did it happen? What an interesting story. Thank you so much. We have to draw a line under that and move on to In the News. So 3 stories today, but big stories, interesting stories. We're going to start with Maureen. Maureen has positioned herself at the incredibly ornate headquarters of TikTok. And she's going to give us the latest on this deadlines and Amazon and money and not tariffs, because we made a promise to ourselves not to even use the T word. So Maureen, you're standing outside in the bright sun. I hope you're covered with your delicate skin. What's the story there on TikTok?
Yes, Oliver, I'm here outside TikTok's offices, and I'm also going to leave us not only with coverage of what the current situation is with TikTok and the US government, but also I'm going to give you a prediction, and I promise to do that as I did earlier in the year. I'm going to revise my prediction, and that's going to be kind of interesting to follow. But we've been following TikTok, and of course the saga of the US wanting to ban the use of TikTok in the US because of national security concerns. As we all know, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese incorporated company. And the concerns being raised from the US is that perhaps, Chinese can influence or use certainly TikTok to influence the American public, and that is highly political. Anyway, we have had various milestones that both the current administration and previous administration have put in place, and the latest one in the last few days was that TikTok should be sold to a potential buyer that is at least approved by China. The US doesn't really care who's going to buy it, so long as it's bought by someone other than being left in the hands of the Chinese company. Anyway, that time has passed, and the current administration has said, okay, you can have 75 more days. And we currently are in a bit of a spat between the US and China. So that's in the background. But more importantly, there are a couple of other players that have surfaced to say, oh, we'd like to buy TikTok. But it's not that simple. China is very particular about who and to whom and under what conditions they will sell TikTok. So that's going to be another round of negotiations and discussions. China's basically saying anyone who purchases TikTok and the underlying algorithm, which Claire and I are always talking about, because what is it that you buy TikTok apart from a very large audience? China has been very specific to say that piece of algorithm is a technology export of China, and therefore will be restricted in use, or indeed it will be seen as or deemed to be a technology exported product or service. And in this instance, a product. So China wants to keep its hands on it, and that's the layman's sort of position. So there will be significant conditions attached to anyone purchasing purchasing TikTok or Chinese-owned TikTok. So that may well limit some of the buyers that are going to be approved, and that will entail many other, I think, negotiations, and there'll probably be further extensions. Anyway, the people that are in the running are, and I will say in my preferred order, Oracle, AppLovin, no longer Elon Musk, but Elon Musk will probably indirectly have some sort of influence over or will participate in taking some form or stake in this. So Oracle, because of Larry Ellison. And some very good investors, including Vanguard Group, Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett, BlackRock, and a few others. So I am putting and placing my bets and changing my prediction from Elon Musk to Oracle as being probably the ultimate buyer of TikTok. So I'll pause there because I can get into a lot more discussions about other players, including AppLovin and maybe even Perplexity. But there's a small group of investors across all of those that will ultimately ensure that they're participating in any form of investment. But the underlying issue here is there will be conditions. And by my reckoning, I think also China will still have probably a minimum of up to about 20% still share in TikTok. But Claire, I don't know what your take is more broadly.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting what's going on from a I don't want to go too much into political, but there was a deal on the table. We don't know what the shape of the deal was, but earlier in the week there was a deal for an American company or consortium to buy the American part of TikTok, and ByteDance, as you said, would have kept 20%. And the Chinese government walked away, specifically I would say, using some of President Trump's own playbook, using it entirely as commercial leverage. And this is a big political point for the current administration in the US, TikTok, as it was for the previous one. And it's something that they feel very strongly about. It's something that's been debated for, in various chambers, etc. So they really wanted a deal. But the truth is they can't do a deal unless the government in China approves it. And there was a deal and now there isn't because they're using this as leverage. So I think at the end of the day, this will entirely be played out politically, which is probably not great news for ByteDance, although they seem quite cool about it because I think at the end they probably prefer the current situation, they definitely prefer the current situation, which is that they own everything. Yeah, I think that will be solved when the current standoff between America and China on the tariffs. And I know we said no T word, but there you go. Is solved because that's what is currently standing in front of the deal. And it's interesting that the administration has extended the deadline. They really didn't have a choice. They were forced to do this.
Sorry, we're not allowed to say the big T word, but frankly, when we say that there was a deal, there was a set of proposals that were put on the table. And I actually think that Amazon's bid was just a non-starter because there was in no way, shape, or form it was going to comply to any of the criteria set out by China. And then AppLovin and maybe Oracle. Oracle has an existing relationship.
Because they already host.
They're hosting the data. They know exactly what to expect. They've got, they're not curry favoring with the Trump administration really, except don't forget we've got Stargate and Larry Ellison's involved in that too, with Sam Altman standing alongside him. So there's a lot of other things going on, I think, in the background that I think Larry Ellison probably does have the ear of the current administration, so maybe he can be quite influential as well. But it's kind of interesting. Although it is, the Oracle is let's say significantly funded by the institutions. Larry Ellison does have a strong voting rights, and sits on the board as well, so he might be able to sort of tip this over. But you're right, it is playing who's going to play chicken. So who's going to blink first? So which is all the jargon and the language being used in the current sort of tariff
I
environment.
think I
Oops,
would
I mentioned
define
tariffs.
it
Yeah.
slightly differently. I would say who wants it more, and I think at the moment the China's very whatever.
Doesn't need
Yeah,
it.
doesn't
They
need
didn't
it.
start this
Doesn't need
fight.
a deal.
They didn't
Yeah.
start this fight. They think that
No.
they're not influencing the American, citizens. It's
Yeah.
only the fact that there's national security issues that are put on the table by the current regime.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's
probably
interesting.
listening to Billy Joel, we didn't start the fire.
Yeah.
That's probably the same.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
As
That's
we
very
all
apt.
should. I
That's
mean,
very
most
apt.
of us
Yeah.
should listen to
Yeah.
this right now.
Okay, well, again, we'll keep an eye on that story, no doubt. It'll be featuring, coming across our newsroom desk, no doubt, in the very near future. Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Claire. Let's move on. So, Claire, you have this next story about the Nintendo Switch 2. Tell us all about it.
The Nintendo Switch 2, the new console, the replacement for the Nintendo Switch, is due to launch in June, so pretty soon. And it's an important launch. One, it's the first launch for of a new console really for 5 years since the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox launched in 20 at the end of 2020. So it sort of comes mid-cycle. It's also, the Nintendo Switch, the original one was launched in 2017, so it's kind of old now. There has been it's so a lot of people are looking at this launch as a signal to try and figure out where the gaming console market is going. The Switch has always been a slightly different beast from if you play video games from the other platforms because it's more of a hybrid console. You can play on your own, like a Game Boy, like a Nintendo Game Boy, or you can play on the big screen with other people. So it's got that dual functionality, which makes it slightly different. Originally, the original Switch was very much about first party gaming, so the Mario Kart, Donkey Kong, etc., and a few third party, but they were never very good at really expanding to all of the big third party AAA games. They are trying to change that with the Switch 2, which is going to be much more AAA game friendly, which is a positive thing. And people are very much hoping that it will relaunch the games market in terms of the because obviously as soon as a new console comes up, none of your old games work and you need to buy them again or you need to buy new games, etc. So there's a lot of hope that this will create a big boom in the sale of games content, which could be up to $7-8 billion in terms of games content, which is enormous. That's the good news about the launch of the Switch 2. Now, I know we didn't say anything. We didn't say we wouldn't talk about tariffs, but actually, the new tariffs, as they stand at the moment, are going to have a pretty major impact on the launch of the Switch 2, which was already looking bad because, well, was already looking slightly dodgy because they set a fairly high price of in the US $450, which is on the high end for a console, but they were already going to sell it as a loss at the beginning because it's actually very expensive to put together. With the tariffs, wherever they end up, this could end up being a much bigger loss per machine, which Nintendo will not be able to afford, in which case they might have to raise the price of the console. It's already pretty expensive. There is some price elasticity in that market still, perhaps less so than in other markets, but it probably, if they have to go up to, let's say, $550, for instance, for the console, it will have an impact on the sale, both of the console and then subsequently of the game. So everybody's sort of waiting with bated breath to see how it will do in the context of, do people want a new console or are they actually happy to just continue playing on their phone? If they do want a new console, are they prepared to pay that much money? Are they prepared to pay even more money? Is that price even realistic in the context of higher tariffs around the world? Will they be able to make the consoles in a world where things don't travel as much as they used to? And then if people do buy the consoles, what sort of games will they buy? So it's a story that we should continue to observe. It's going to be, I think, the big story of the year for gaming, and a lot of people will be watching very carefully what happens. Maureen, I don't know whether you have thoughts on the new Mario Kart game.
I mean, overall, I think Nintendo is really relying on its old appeal, so its existing wide, which is great, wide demographics, a wide customer base, and brand loyalty. They're heavily reliant on that because there's from what we read, from what we can see, there's no major innovation in this console. So there's the lack of that major innovation, and heavily reliant on brand loyalty, but double the price. And of course, as you say, if you stick some tariffs on top of that, it's really quite expensive. And I just feel as if this may not be the game changer. This may not be the event that really shakes up the industry, that wakes up the industry. I just don't think there's enough bells and whistles to really bring the industry back up and get people excited. I just don't think the new generation, the fans aren't there, and I just think it is cost. In this cost sensitive environment, I don't think 2025 is the right year to launch. But let's see. I may eat my words. Around that. But
I feel we're always underestimating the appetite of gamers for new things.
know,
I agree. I think there are a
Defies
lot of
logic. Yeah.
Be a
I
tricky
agree.
one.
Agree.
Well, I suppose a lot of them don't have girlfriends to spend money on. Potentially, it's
there
very
you
mean.
go
I'm
with
sorry. The
Pros,
stereotyping,
cons.
the old-fashioned Gen X
there's equal
stereotyping.
number of female gamers
Gamers.
Is there?
to
That's great
male
news.
gamers. Yep. It's
Oh,
almost
great.
neck and neck, and in some territories, probably more female
Yeah,
gamers than
that
there are.
does
Wow.
include mobile
Yeah.
gaming.
It does.
I
That's true.
can agree.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I
Definitely.
see a lot of that going on. Good Lord.
Well,
And
it's still gaming.
It is.
online fruit machines. They wind me up. As someone who likes computers and gambling, the idea of an online computer-generated fruit machine makes me quiver. So that's a great story. Yep. Again, another one to monitor. Great. So that'll come over our desks again. And now, Maureen, you have the final story of this chunk. A news coming in from Deadline.com. Will there be a UK streaming levy? And is this a good idea? Answer those questions, if you will, Maureen.
Yeah. So, I mean, the UK government has been, they formed a committee. They've been looking specifically at film and high-end TV for some time now. And there's a report out that is that it really sort of sets out a set of proposals for how to protect the UK industry for film and TV, as I say, high-end TV. And the proposal was that surfaced, that is really polarizing the industry, is that in order to protect the foundations of Britain as a highly creative market and almost sort of the European market of Hollywood, and a gateway to Europe, is more turning into being sort of quite protectionist, and saying that maybe we do need to protect our industry and protect our intellectual property, protect our ecosystem by levying a tax on streamers. And the reason for that, it sounds a bit harsh, and I started out with the conclusion and I work backwards just slightly. The reason for that is there's a lot of, as we know, a lot of international US and beyond Europe companies that do work very closely with UK production companies to produce high-end TV, but they don't they don't actually trade very well. So intellectual property is not left behind in the UK. There's some terms of trade which doesn't really allow UK producers to keep hold of their IP. So there's an issue around international companies, streamers in particular, are stealing our IP and stealing the sort of foundations of our content. And then the flip side of that is also there's a lot of activity going on where we international streamers in particular are going for volume, negotiating it in those terms, and then just taking our production and taking it into the international environment. And again, the compensation doesn't reflect that sort of degree of distribution. So there's a lot of issues at hand here, and Parliament is trying to, with the industry, trying to really sort of figure out whether or not a tax is the right way of tackling this. Now, it is also proposing a voluntary contribution in order to keep the healthy ecosystem that is this is what we're trying to sort of achieve. But it's also saying if there isn't sufficient contributions which are voluntary, then there will be a mandated tax. And as I say, we're seeing a polarized sort of response to that, to say, if you start to impose taxes on potential investors into the market, the law of economics suggests that people will stop investing and will go elsewhere. And UK is not the only market where you can find talent. The only market where there's some great high-end drama. They'll go elsewhere, and that's really not what we're trying to look for. And then the flip side of it is also, why don't you find an alternative method rather than a stick? Let's find some sort of incentivization, which is a carrot beyond just maybe donations. There could be other ways. And so this is ongoing, and it's against and set against other discussions that are going on in Parliament with respect to AI and copyright. But one is, and I love the fact that, I don't know if it was the Deadline article that raised this, but there was another one called Screen Power that I was looking at, and this inward investment versus sort of the British concept was called the Barbie paradox, which I thought was really interesting. And this is, the challenge here is big budget foreign productions creating jobs and revenue, but crowd out. They come and they land in the UK, and they make these lovely sort of great films that make lots of money, but they're actually taking that IP elsewhere. It doesn't belong here in the UK, and they crowd out the British-made drama and IP, and that is of concern. And so, there are some domestic voices here, that say, let's do this more deliberately. Let's be a bit more considerate. But a stick applied to streamers may not actually work and may be counterproductive. But Claire, I don't know what sort of view are you very much leaning on the protectionists, or are you leaning on the tariff?
I have my doubts about this. You've explained it very well. First of all, at this stage, it's a proposal, right? It's the Culture, Media and Sports Committee, and it's a recommendation. It hasn't been applied. Obviously, as you would expect, the streamers have reacted very, very negatively, and they've said specifically that they would raise the price to the consumer, because this would be a levy on their subscriber revenues. So it's not actually on the production, it's on the subscriber revenues. And they basically said, we'll pass it on to consumers, which is not great news for the UK consumer. It's also interesting, the current proposal is that this money goes then to the BFI, which is the British Film Institute. Of course, they have a high-end TV fund as well, but it's not a TV institute who would then administer the money. Obviously, they've already got some funds that they administer, but is this the right way to do it? What the problem with the streamers is not so much, as you said, that they don't invest in local productions. They do invest in a lot of UK productions producing here. The problem is that they are crowding out the PSB, the public service broadcasters, and pricing them out of the market. And I don't see how that levy is going to solve that problem. We are getting a lot of perhaps less culturally British, although you'd argue things like Toxic Town, like Adolescence. I think Netflix is in a pretty strong place right now to say that they're publishing a lot of culturally British content. But there's a lot of production. Hollywood spent a lot of money on production in the UK. The issue isn't that so much as it is that, as you pointed out, they're pricing out people with less deep pockets. I'm not a huge fan of that levy. To be honest, I don't think it works entirely and I think, as you say yourself, it's going to have a lot of unintended consequences. That it's well-intentioned, but I'm not sure it actually works economically. So it'll be interesting to see if it's taking up. I could see how it would be it's a good soundbite, but I'm not entirely sure it's what the industry needs. It does need something. There is an issue with large streaming companies based outside the country, in the US, who come in, who spend a lot of money, who don't have the same requirements as our broadcasters, who do not apply the same rules, who don't have the same IP regulations around content. All of these are definitely true and need to be addressed. But I'm not sure this solves it. So I agree with the problem, but not necessarily the solution.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there we go. That is it for news. So that was, in fact, in the news. Okie dokie, cracking on. Of course, it's Podmojis now, and we've got 3 of these as well. So they're quite significant ones, but let's see how we get on. I'm going to turn to Maureen first. OpenAI investment closes a very big round. How does that make you feel, Podmoji wise?
Oh, Podmoji wise, well, I mean, it's a staggering pot of gold. So I need my sunglasses for the
Of
staggering
course.
pot of gold, of
Of
course, of
course.
course, of course. Oh, actually, I'll leave them on. Yeah. So OpenAI has been able to raise a staggering. I mean, I can't get my head around this. $40 billion. That's a lot of money, concentrated by a few private sort of funding sources, including SoftBank, Microsoft, of course, will continue to fund. But there's been a lot of upset and concern. In particular, Elon Musk is, of course, taking some degree of umbrage. And is basically, there's some legal resistance from Elon Musk, because this very much is about funding to convert the business from a not for profit to a for profit. So effectively, just to sort of get rid of the charitable status, and then move it into an environment where it is more accountable, and it allows it to be profitable, if it can be profitable. So basically, it will entail some restructuring. So it'll have to sort of change the way it does business. It will, of course, use the money for a number of really interesting things, including continuing to fuel the AI arms race. It will also help with the Stargate initiative, which I referred to earlier, which is basically Oracle is included in that, and really sort of improving on the AI infrastructure. But effectively, it's a lot of money, that will be provided and raised in order to help with building out OpenAI. But in particular, it's also to make that an initial public offering candidate. So within probably about a year or two, it will then come to the public markets. And that's the whole premise of raising so much money, to get it into a stronger position, to help it to move from a charitable status, get some good infrastructure, good staffing, and continue with the AI arms race that it's in. That's my sort of synopsis of what this is all about.
Correct. And the sunglasses are
And
because
the
the future's
sunglasses
so
are
bright.
because the future. Well, no, because the amount of money that's been put in is just so
Oh, it's
staggeringly
yes.
gold-like and bright. Yeah,
It's bright and shiny. That's very handy that you've got new sunglasses. You're now wearing 2 pairs of glasses, for the
I
record,
am.
which makes me feel like you've gone blurred. So it's kind of freaky. But anyway, when you get those prescription lenses in the sunglasses, I think that'll be far, far better. Claire, over to you.
I am going to have a sort of doubtful emoji. For the record, I'm
Oh, that one.
doubtful.
Yeah, that one's come back again. Lovely. Yes.
That
Yeah.
about which bit? Which bit? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I find it that, well, first of all, I think it's especially, as you know, we started with Wikipedia, which has remained a non-profit, it's remained an open source software, and it's kind of sad to see OpenAI, which started sort of from the same place, deciding to jettison that heritage and go fully for profit. There are differences. The costs are much higher. I get that. It's not, you can't directly compare it, but still, part of me thinks it's a bit sad. It's a sign of the times, as they say. But the other thing is, I think, OpenAI has a lot more competition. I'm surprised that people still see it as such a strong player in this world, with DeepSeek launching, with other smaller players like Perplexity. They're not the only game in town anymore, as they were 3 years ago. And I think not only that, but they are perhaps not the best game in town. So I wonder, yeah, I know I've said it. So I wonder why this isn't reflected in any way in their funding round. So, yeah.
It's reflected in terms of there are conditions attached to SoftBank's money. There are conditions attached to Microsoft matching those funds as well. That if they do not or are not able to reorganize as a sort of fully fledged operational company that for profit, then a lot of that funding will be significantly halved. So there's a lot of stipulation for you need to run this like a business that would be able to continue to compete, and we're not just feeding you money just for you to at least keep up with the rest and spend it in a way that is chasing certain personal projects rather than sustainable and profitable projects. So I think there's going to be a grown up in the, let's say, in the room that's basically says, no, I'm now going to monitor the way you spend this money, and it will be a serious sort of business plan attached to this. So certainly that's what's being said, and that's what's attached to the funding. So you're absolutely right, Claire. It is a different environment as well, and they will need to sort of prove that they can spend this money in an appropriate way, and with consequences. I.e., they need to make money. So I think there's an accountability bit there that will force the sort of reorganization and restructuring of the business in that way. And maybe they can't make that jump, in which case, well, gosh, let's see where they end up, in a year's time. But there are definitely conditions to that. And I will though, it's a personal opinion. You have your personal opinion, Claire, but I have to say that ChatGPT, in my view, across and playing with all of them so far, apart from DeepSeek, that I think it still remains the best. And maybe just because I'm familiar with using it, although I do jump around Perplexity and I do jump around some of the other models, I do still believe from a text point of view, and its reasoning now at the moment is bloody good. Really, forgive me, Oliver, for sort of blaspheming here, but I
Yes,
still think I think it's the best in town.
Yeah,
so far.
not strictly blaspheming, but certainly turning the air blue with your language. Claire, I have to ask you for a Podmoji because amazingly,
I did.
I
went
really?
there.
Of course, you did right at the beginning. Yes,
you know what?
sorry.
I'm gonna say it. I look perplexed, and do you know why? Because actually, I have spent a lot. I've switched. I think I spend more time on Perplexity than I do on ChatGPT these days. Yeah. So therefore, I'm looking perplexed at the OpenAI round funding round.
Multiple layers of meaning. Very good.
That's me.
I got that, Claire. I saw that at the beginning. I know that you're a fan. I was wondering when you'd switch completely. Yeah. Do you have both open?
Completely.
Okay, because okay, yeah.
I like the writing style of Perplexity better. Anyway, we should move on.
Well, you remember it's like the times we had our own preferred search engines, isn't it? I was an Excite person like myself. Like and then there was Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, and then someone showed me Google. I'm like, hello, this is Google. I thought, what a stupid name. Anywho, it has been well documented that Claire Tavernier is a massive fan of soap operas in any language, pretty much. She favours French and English, and as such, it's only right that she should lead on this next Podmoji. Yes, tell me all about it. So, the headline is "Soap Operas for a Win," but I don't quite understand what that means. So explain in Podmojize.
I will say first that I also watch a lot of soap operas in German, and this is because way back when I was responsible for soap operas at Fremantle, and they did produce a lot of German soap operas. And soap operas are wonderful. They're high volume, daily, it's a daily soaps. Here in the UK, there are the two main ones, I would say, are EastEnders and Coronation Street. In the US, there's a bunch of them, of course. One of them, perhaps the most well-known, is Days of Our Lives. Do you remember Days of Our Lives? Days of Our Lives, does that ring any bell? I used to watch it, actually. It was on in French TV. It was in French, obviously it was dubbed. So I thought they all spoke French. Days of Our Life is 60-year-old. It's in its 59th season, which is pretty impressive. And in 2024, it was the #2 most watched Peacock original TV series on the Peacock platform, which I think is a huge win. Now, there's a reason for that. It's volume. There's a lot of episodes, and so just and the metric here is minutes watched. So just by virtue of having had in 2024 169 episodes, that definitely made it much more visible. But still, 3.1 billion minutes watch of Days of Our Life. The only one that beat it is Love Island USA, which it's kind of sad, but never mind. That got me to think about what was happening on our shores, and I looked at EastEnders and Coronation Street, and obviously their live audiences have dropped quite significantly. I mean, we're talking about shows that used to, draw the nations. There used to be something in the national grid would brace themselves for the ad break in Coronation Street because everybody would go and put the kettle on, which I just always think this story is so British. But anyway, that's not the case anymore. Live audiences have dropped, but they are doing quite well on streaming. So EastEnders is the most popular title for young audiences on iPlayer, which I think is really interesting. And so there's a sort of second life for a lot of these soaps, and people are coming back to this. There's a lot of comfort in watching soaps. There's people are part of your family. They tend to deal with very important. They do tend to deal with very important social issues. Traditionally, they've raised some really important societal things. Famously, EastEnders in the UK carried a very important HIV story, Mark Fowler, which remains the thing that most people of my generation, I will say, remember when they think about HIV and how to catch it and what to do with it. So it's interesting well, yeah, that didn't come out quite right. Anyway, the point is, I love soaps. I'm very happy to see that Days of Our Lives, which at some point was very much on the verge of being cancelled, is still alive and kicking and doing great. And congratulations to everyone who works on a soap, because it's a lot of bloody work. So my Podmoji is a celebration Podmoji.
Yeah, fair play. And of course, our mutual friend Diedrich Santa. He was
yes,
running
of
EastEnders
course.
for a
Diedrich
while.
was executive producer of EastEnders. We know a lot of people in soaps. I know a lot of people in soaps. I love soaps.
Yeah, no, so does he. Almost obsessive, and I think you had to be in his job. Had some great stories about how to deal with the press when some young actor went off and did something odd. But anywho, that's a great Podmoji. Maureen, you must have a view.
I do, and I'm staggered that the Days of Our Lives has been going on for 60 years, 60, which I thought was staggering. But of course now Peacock has this exclusive rights to continue to air Days of Our Life. But it is an interesting contrast that you've got this back catalogue, which is and continues to be, and now deemed as sort of original content because they make so much of it on a daily basis. That is effectively probably the mainstay of a certain type of audience now for Peacock. And you can contrast that to, say, the big streamers at the moment who barely get to 10 episodes, and start to scramble for, oh gosh, the next piece of, may even cancel it, and two, need to scramble for, marketing for new audiences to come and look at new shows. And this goes back to the theme that we've been talking about before, that it's the familiarity, it's you can still binge watch old shows, but that cost of a new viewer is quite significant for the streamers, and of course been of concern from a profitability point of view, and has led to significant churn. So it's fascinating to see that an old genre, a stable for many production companies, many studios, is now coming back to the fore. So staggering. So I'm like, wow, I mean, we love, Severance and Rings of Power and all those other great sort of special effect type sort of programming, but look, you just go to a few people with one or two cameras, and just the saga and the storytelling just carries you over to the next day and the next day and the next day.
Okay, I'm gonna have to pick you up on a few people with one or two cameras. You've clearly never visited the set. These are massive machines.
No, I know they're big. I know they're big rigs and whatnot. But it's it compared to the cost required, for a big film, a big episodic high-end TV drama and the like. No, I appreciate that there's lots of rigs and lots going on in that room, and they're quite big rooms, but by comparison, it's not in any way, shape, or form the same as the big $100 million that have been spent. I mean, I think you were probably part of the team of people that were looking at how to make them quite cost effective.
I did replace all the lights by LEDs.
Exactly.
Moved from 3 cameras to 2. These were big projects. Yep. Yes.
And Neighbours was the beneficiary of that, as were the German Unter Uns and other type of shows benefited from that.
Gute Zeiten, schlechte Zeiten.
Exactly.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Was there a Podmoji? There was a wow, wasn't there?
There was. Well, no. Here I get slap wrist because I got into trouble for calling calling the production small.
Yeah. But you did say the word.
Imagine if Didrik's listening.
Yeah, I know. You won't be happy. I know he's a regular listener, but you did use the word rigs quite a lot, which sounded quite authentic. So I'll take that. Wow.
I was allowed to go. I was allowed to go and watch, one or two being shown, and
right.
but not on a daily basis like Claire. Absolutely not.
It's a daily basis. I did fly to Ramsay Street a few times. Anyway, moving on.
That's
Moving
cool.
on. We're running
That
out
is
of time.
cool. That's very cool. Just an off the cuff comment. I was in Ramsey Street, of course.
Got a picture.
Yeah, on the other podcast I do on the mental health, we got onto local TV, me and Dr. Paul Keedwell. It was
Oh, very
absolutely
good.
fabulous. I loved it. I wasn't in the slightest bit nervous. I was just like, oh my God, this is where I was born to be. But in fact, I ended up in office. So that's good. Well done. Congrats. Let's move on to the next one. Although, of course, we should shout out Bill Roach. I mean, Days of Our Lives 60 years, but he's been on Coronation Street for 65 years, and he's 92 years old. So he's again his book playing Ken Barlow. So that's quite impressive. So yes, so James Cameron is joining the board of Stability AI. If you go to deadline.com, you can see him being interviewed about that. But Maureen, you have an opinion that you would like to translate into our final Podmoji.
Well, yeah. Well, this is a continuation of the conversation we just had just now, which is about how AI can enable shows to be created, films to be created in a cost-effective way, and picking up. James Cameron was really, a pioneer, as we know with Avatar, Terminator, and others, at the use of VFX, so visual, special effects, and very much taking technology into the post-production environment, and he and many others who effectively sort of say, slightly worried about whether or not technology will cause harm to the creative environment, and perhaps individuals will lose jobs. Well, on the contrary, this is a really interesting statement that Cameron is making here by joining one of the more innovative sort of AI company, Stability AI, saying that look, the reason that I'm here, I will join the board, is because I want to champion especially how AI will be integrated into the workflows of creating film and TV. And he made a really interesting quote, which is, he said, this is not about AI cutting costs. And even though VFX, of course, is, really expensive in that post-production environment, and as we know and we've spoken about, Jellyfish and a few others are in financial and Technicolor in financial dire straits, and in fact leading into administration. What he's effectively saying is it is not about laying off half the staff. It's about doubling their speed to completion on a given shot. So I just love the way that he is embracing AI in that environment. And I don't think this is, paying lip service to or pandering in any way to, the unions. I think he's actually being pretty honest about this. And I think he will be quite pivotal in the direction of bringing the technology and the creative art together. And I think he's, how long it takes him to make a film. A lot of that time is spent in that sort of post-production environment. So I think it's this really interesting statement, and there are a couple of others. Joe Russo has come out as well. You've got, Ridley Scott and others who really are embracing now AI to enable, there's no loss of staff on the set, to enable projects to be speeded up, and for AI to be integrated in workflow, because it's quite, and as we all know, it's quite tricky. It's not easy in that post-production environment, and certainly what they're saying and trying to suggest is it will slowly move into being an enabler in the storytelling part, but it's not there yet either. So I think there's a really pragmatic approach to a shift from anti-AI to a more pragmatic AI adoption. And I really do believe, and I think I said this about 2025. I think we're now going to start to see more adoption and then the outputs, because we really haven't seen any fundamental changes, I think, in the TV and film industry. We're seeing it in marketing and small episodic and campaigns, but we haven't yet seen it really. So yeah, it's so I've gone on and on and on about this, so I need to stop, because I think I'm getting my throat cut. So Claire, what do you think? And I haven't done a Podmoji yet. My Podmoji is wow. I think this
Another
is a really
wow.
good move.
That's 2 wows. Okay. 2
Sorry,
wows.
I didn't mean to shut you up.
That's
I'm
all right.
just
No, but you
conscious of
should.
time.
Yeah.
And I know this is a topic close to your heart, which is close to mine as well. My Podmoji is interesting. That's my Podmoji.
You went quite English
I
then.
think it's good. I agree with you on most of what you've said. I think it's very good to see Hollywood starting to engage with it. That's the only way it's going to work. You know, you're not going to put the genie back in the box, and so that you need to get those people in. It's interesting that it's James Cameron, who literally wrote 3 movies about robots taking over, who does it. But on the other hand, he's somebody who's always been fascinated by technology, so it makes sense. I will pick you up on one thing, which is, or pick him up rather. It's interesting that this is not going to be fewer people, it's going to be faster, because, you know, freelancers in film and TV are paid by the week. So if it's faster, it's still less money. They might be still the same size team, but, you know, if they're shooting in 4 weeks instead of 8, somebody's getting half the pay. And I don't think we can produce twice as much content, because there's just not enough space for it. So I you know, that's slightly flawed logic, I will say.
I don't think it's going to be half. The length
No,
of
I
time
know,
it's
that's in terms
taking.
of
But
the
I
way
know
he's
it's
presented it.
taking. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and
I think
I
that's
agree.
That's slightly flawed logic.
It's a bit
I'm
linear.
sure it won't be half. But yeah, so that's it. That's my interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
very good. Lots of facial expressions, which we always go down well. Which means that
On
when I topped up,
podcast, I know.
yeah, no, with me. I was just thinking selfishly, but we must get on YouTube. And that totting up the points with the facial thing, and the fact that Maureen did it's a draw. It's a draw this week. 7 points each. So congrats.
Let's get that audited one day.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's perfectly open. I have a spreadsheet. I fear no external examination. So that's it. We've done it. Gosh, quite a long one in the end. That was a goodie as well. Love the Wikipedia stuff. Lots of good news as well, and lots of news that we can keep an eye on. I always like those running stories, like a soap opera, in fact. But we are out of time, and we have to say goodbye. So I'll do so to Claire first.
Goodbye.
And I will do so to Maureen second.
Bye.
See you all on the next one, but for now, goodbye.